just about a minute or so past 2 o'clock, and now's as good a time as any to get started. If you've got Kath's screen in front of you, you should be able to see me in a little box on the side, just underneath you, who's in a different location and waving at us. I'm Rob Ward from the Centre for Recording Achievement. CRA is hosting this discussion, and in a second I'll just ask my fellow conspirators just to introduce themselves, Hugh, Vaughan, and Nikki and Chris also from the Higher Education Academy, and Jen Reynolds from VTI, because this is very much a collective effort, and really what we want to do is to create a context for developmental conversation. You should have received already by email the template that we'll be using, and also a sheet which will list some of the questions that we had a couple of days ago. The presentation we've got now has got some more material in it, but you have the opportunity to send us stuff later on which would add to your responses. A couple of things about housekeeping. You should be aware that there's, hi Joni, you should be aware that there's the opportunity on this system to speak through your microphone, to use the webcam if you've got one, and pretty importantly for this conversation, to use the chat box, which is located on my system via a menu which pops out on the right-hand side of the screen. And how we're going to do things, because of our previous experiences, we will mute the microphones. A whole range of background noise tends to be around in offices, particularly shared spaces these days, and we want to give people the maximum opportunity to hear what's being said. But periodically we'll have some stop-off points where we'll unmute everybody's microphone, and we can have a purposeful conversation at that point. But between those points, please make points in the chat box, which I've just written the word chat into, and press send, and we will monitor that box, and we will collect up comments and thoughts as we go along. Hugh, do you just want to introduce yourself, and then we'll just do a quick 1-minute whiz round for that?
Yes, I'll do that. This is to test the mic as well. I hope that you could hear me.
Bit quiet, Hugh.
Bit quiet.
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Hugh Morris, Academic Registrar, Swansea University, and I have been working with Rob and others to try and develop a template based on comments that we've had from the sector. But today I very much hope that we can have an open discussion about what is needed. We might come to the conclusion that nothing is needed, so, but it is just an initial stage of the consultation.
Smashing, thanks Hugh. Vaughan, do you want to just say hello?
Yeah, Vaughan Robinson here. I was the founding director of the graduate school at King's College in London, where we've got something like 2,800 PhD students.
Fantastic. And Jen from VTI, if you can hear us, do you just want to add your 2 penneth?
Yep, certainly. I'm Jen Reynolds, and I'm the Partnerships Manager at VTI. I hope you can all hear me well enough. I've been working for VTI for quite some time, and I work predominantly with the Researcher Development Framework, so very much working with researchers and their transferable skills and competencies. Fantastic, thanks Jen, and we'll come to that in a bit.
Yep. And Nikki and Chris from the HCA, who are our 4th partners in crime. Is there anything you want to just mention at this point, colleagues in York?
No, we'd just like to say hi to everybody, and thanks for the description of partners in crime.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's the context. That was the housekeeping, and just reinforced Kath's earlier point that if you haven't signed in, please sign out and sign in with a name, because we're a bit stuck if we're wanting to send you materials. Okay. Kath, we need to go, I think, now to the second slide, if that's okay. doing this in a range of contexts. I'll just move that out of the way. Can we put that up as a slide? That'd be great, and just move that. That's the first slide, so if we can just move that forward. Just hang on a sec. That's it. Okay. Vaughan, do you want to say a little bit about, I mean, Hugh mentioned it,
Sure.
about, you know, creating something useful for this particular student context, and we started to think about, you know, why this made sense to us. If you're happy to just talk to the first 4 bullet points, and Hugh, you could perhaps talk a bit to the 5th one, which is a fairly recent development, I think, which is this European development. Sorry, Vaughan, over to you.
Okay, so the thinking about why a here are might be valuable, from my perspective, I think the employability of our PGRs is an absolutely key issue. We know that the number of PhDs awarded in the UK rose by 19% between 2009 and 2012, and that's an extra 3,500 awarded per year. And we know that the number of academic jobs didn't rise commensurately. So I think we have to be very mindful of the employment outcomes from the increasing number of PGRs that we're recruiting. Secondly, I think that the VTI research tells us that 59% of PGRs are not in research or teaching research roles 3.5 years after graduation. So we really want to help our PGRs with their employability by recording their achievements, encouraging them to reflect on their personal development and addressing any weaknesses, and doing all which is meaningful to employers. Second reason, I think, and we need to be mindful that we have a range of students involved in the PGR community. So we've got people who are on industrial doctorates, people who are doing conventional PhDs, people who are doing professional doctorates, and people who are doing joint doctorates incorporating international experience. So we've got quite a varied constituency here, and we need to capture that variety. The third bullet point is we know from the QAA that they are keen that PGRs have personal development planning, and we know that now most of our undergraduates and PGTs will be entering the labour market with it here. So we need to address whether that would also be valuable for PGRs. And the next bullet point, the Burgess report, which initiated the HERE project, commented really that employers may well not understand the range of skills and competencies that university education provides beyond specialist subject knowledge. And I think that's especially true for PhD students. So I think we need to train them and help them to be explicit about the skills that they've acquired, and they acquire many of them, in a language that employers relate to. So that's really my thinking why here are might be of value. But Hugh, you can also give it the European context, can't you?
Yes, Swansea University has been issuing diploma supplements to undergraduate and taught master students now for about 10 years. We've progressed recently. We issue a diploma supplement to all students, but it's in an electronic format. And it's very, very useful in that it can link into the employer sector so that they can actively search on that. However, the missing ingredient from my perspective is the research student. And that's what generated my interest in this area. However, I'm also aware that discussions are ongoing in Europe to develop a diploma supplement for research students. And a body called the Structural Reform Working Group has been developing policies. And from what I understand, it's about to submit recommendations back to the Moynier follow-up group. I've been privileged to have an advanced copy of that, and I must stress it is in very much draft format from the UK International Unit. One or two references, and quite substantial references, to the diploma supplement, and then a few paragraphs then relating to the diploma supplement for research students. And if I use the word diploma supplement, I mean the HERE, and again, if I use the HERE, I also mean the diploma supplement. In my view, it's the same document. I'll just read a few of the quotes from that document. That they're recommending a review of the diploma supplement throughout Europe, and as well as reviewing its content and its nature, to stress the that the document is there to promote employability. And that they also stress that they should take into account, or the review should take into account, the possibilities of providing up-to-date information offered by modern information technology, including the digitalization of the diploma supplement. So I think that's important that we bear that in mind. There is then a specific bullet point to say that to ensure coherence between a review of the diploma supplement and the possible development of a doctoral supplement within the European research area. So in a nutshell, if the European area is developing a diploma supplement, or possibly will develop a template, then I think it's useful for the UK to be party to that discussion and possibly to lead on it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hugh. That's helpful. I hope it gives colleagues a sense of certainly some of our starting points, both around the needs of students, but also with that wider focus on how we might influence the development process at a European level to the good, particularly around the context of ensuring maximum opportunities for the students that are with us for their postgraduate research study. Kath, if you can move on to the next slide, and we'll just give a bit of a context about where we're up to, and then I'll hand back to Hugh. We're doing a bit of a double act at this stage, and then we'll open it up a bit. So where we started out, and I think this slide is almost historical because we've been rewriting these slides this morning. We started out using the same template structure as the original here, which colleagues will recognise, some of you anyway, has 8 sections, but we've done some restructuring in the middle, and what we're going to do is to look at it really in terms of the sections, but bundle them together. So in a minute Hugh will talk us through some of the earlier sections, and then we'll spend some time in discussion, hopefully, around where thinking has started to diverge from the undergraduate here in terms of sections 5 and 6. And we've given you some questions to think about and maybe to respond to. There are 4 there. We'll come up to some others as we go along. Some of those about the digitisation issue and the wider development issues. So can we link to the RDF in some way? Can we use the here to support that reflective process? And a key one, I guess, which is, can we do this without a lot of new money and with existing information? And really that general one, can we develop something together which will do justice to our postgrads, and can we get it to the level so we can really offer it to the European colleagues? As it says there, please put your comments in the chat window. We will pick up ideas in discussion, but it would be good to have some indication of how you see things from your perspectives as we go along. And Kath is going to put the first template slide up, I think, now, and I'm going to hand back to Hugh just to talk us through the early sections, which are very much, as I said, based on the undergraduate here that has been created over a trial period of, well, pretty much a decade now. Hugh, over to you.
Okay, thanks. I'm not sure what the practice is in your own university, but certainly here in Swansea, we do not produce a report or a document for a research student as we would for any undergraduate or master student. In the past, we would have issued a transcript for those students, but now we issue a here, which is also the diploma supplement. But for research students, we issue the degree certificate and individual statements. I personally feel that we owe it to the research student to offer them a little bit more than that. And hence, I sat down with a colleague of mine and tried to use the diploma supplement template and to adapt it for research students. In order to keep consistency, and I mean this on an international basis, I used it as much as possible, the template for the undergraduate, removing those sections which were obviously not relevant. We then tested the water with a webinar on our first attempt, and we had some very, very constructive comments back, and we have adapted it in response to those. So therefore, the first sections for me are mirror images and structure of our undergraduate and taught masters diploma supplement. Obviously, the wording on the top that is owned by the European higher education area, and we wouldn't be able to negotiate on that. I think that's an area that internationally they would have to agree, and therefore I would be asking the Bologna follow-up group to take that on board. Could I also state here that I have got the name of a student. This is a current student with us, and Adam, I asked a research student, would they test the draft version of this template and to add information as he or she felt fit. Adam, he's a PhD student in our geography department, jumped at the opportunity, and I had an extremely positive response from him. He even agreed to put all of his information online and available to you. However, he hasn't graduated because you'll see that his graduation date is next year, so he's still with us. So that's the first page. I presume that you'd have no problem in being able to produce that document with names and information which would be held in your student record system. The second section, again, this is identical to our undergraduate and our master's here, diploma supplement. That's the name of the qualification, Doctor of Philosophy. That could be an ND, it could be an MD, whatever degree, obviously. Main fields, again, that's from your database. Name and status of awarding institution. Here it's Swansea University, but potentially you could put in there a joint degree. We run joint degrees with Joseph Fourier University in Grenoble, for instance. I would envisage being able to put the two institutions into that slot. Name and status of the institution, and again, if you have got a double or a joint or a collaborative degree, you can elaborate on that there. Interestingly, we also run NGDs, Doctor of Engineering, which are run in total collaboration with industry. And there again, you could put a reference in there to the industrial partner as a sort of a sleeping partner in terms of awarding the degree. Language of instruction, again, you've got English, but it could be French or Welsh or whatever. Shall I pause there to ask any comments, or shall I go on? Hello there, Rob, are you still there?
Mm-hmm.
I'll go on.
You
Can
turn
you
the mic off.
Right.
Yeah, should we move on to the next slide and then have a break for people to add comments?
Okay, then information level of qualification, again, that's pretty straightforward and nothing contentious, I hope.
No. And we've also had some feedback from Edward at Sheffield, no problems at all for Sheffield to take that kind of model. Kath, do you just want to take us on to section 4, and then we'll perhaps, as I said to you, have a break. This is very much the qualification focus in the here template.
Yes.
Do you want to say a little bit about this, because it's getting into the meat of the detail around what the candidate has achieved.
Yes, again, mode of study would be full-time, part-time, a mixed mode of attendance, whatever you use in your own database. The program requirements, for the undergraduate level, we use this section to articulate the skills that the student would gain from the degree. In other words, the learning outcomes relating to employability all the way through to knowledge. For the research degrees, this could be, again, your learning outcomes, it could be competencies, but I would envisage that section 4.2 should be totally flexible and be institutionally based. Therefore, as an institution, you can add or delete, or you can use that section as you want to articulate the skills that a PhD student can accumulate during the 3 or 4 or 5 year candidature. 4.3 program details. This is simply the enrollment record of a student. And again, you've got a lot of flexibility here. You've got the status of the research candidate, obviously research student here. But for European students, they could be employed and they could be early stage researchers. The enrollment history and mode of study, again, you can use this to the benefit of the student. Full-time, yes, research undertaken at Swansea University. That could be a research undertaken at Swansea University and at Grenoble. The following year could be in industry. But what I'm stressing here is that what we need to do is to be flexible and innovative in the way that we record the status of students on our student record system to enable us to reproduce that in a document like this, which would be of interest to your employer. If an employer is looking for somebody with international experience, this is potentially one area that we could use to support and to promote those additional skills. Thesis title, again, an opportunity to record the exact thesis title. Supervisory team, I think this was in response to some comments from people at the previous webinar. Sometimes the research supervisor, him or herself, could be an extremely beneficial promoting aspect then for the student if that person is world renowned in a particular field. A summary of the research thesis. This is an opportunity for the student or for the supervisor to put a quick summary of what the thesis actually is in plain English for the employer. Grading scheme, we've left those in there because of the need to be as compatible as we can to the undergraduate and taught master's diploma supplement. But obviously it's not needed normally for a PhD student.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll just pause for a moment, colleagues, and take the big risk, which is I'm going to ask Kath to unmute all the microphones because it will give people a chance to comment, and we will be able to take people's comments in terms of what you think about this as an illustration. Is it the kind of thing that you are there things within your systems that would enable this to work well? If we're going to do this, we're going to take a bit of a risk, which will get a lot of background noise, but let's see how we get on. Edward, I don't know whether you can speak to the points you made in the chat box. If not, I think people should be able to see it. Hugh, have you got access to that?
Access to
the chat. Edward's made a point about section 4.2 to put in dissertation abstracts.
I
or would that be too much? Okay, Edward has written...
I think that would come at a later date potentially, at a later stage potentially.
Okay.
Again, what you have to be aware of is that this document should be restricted to about 4 sides.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay. Colleagues, are there comments that people want to make about where we're up to so far, which is steering a course between the diploma supplement template and also the particular needs of postgraduate researchers? Is your sense that we've got the balance about right so far, or there should be some developments that you would want to promote and propose, or is it something you think your student record system could actually do at this stage? When we started out with the here, Bob Burgess was very clear that institutions had to be able to produce this for all students, undergraduate students, and this would be, I think, the same question for postgraduates. So has anybody got any comments they want to make, or a positive comment or a negative comment? Steve's making the point that from Exeter that abstracts are sometimes not in plain English, and there might be a tension between a dissertation abstract and sticking with plain English, so that might be a challenge to us. Okay, and Esther's picked up a point about whether the students will want a paper document for a few years, and for those who have a digital solution, we could have an online and a print version. Mark is asking about employer consultation. I can just say we've started to do some of that, and we have the opportunity, I think, in the months to go, to talk both to a small group of graduate employers who really do want to target postgraduate research students, and to target perhaps another group who see those students as merely joining their online standard application process. Jane's raised another point, and Mark. Jane's point is around postgraduate researchers to say something about learning from their first degree. Hugh, I think at the moment we're seeing here as being relating to a particular episode of study. So there might be a discussion to be had at some point about how different years gained by a student, perhaps an undergraduate version and a postgraduate version, connect in some way. But at the moment, I think they'd be two separate documents, wouldn't they?
They would be 2 or 3 separate documents. I think it's important as well for us to reflect on the purpose of the document. It is not only for the research student and the employer. We will be using this document for every or for the formal aspects then of supervisor-student meetings. It is there to encourage students to undertake, shall we say, enhancing activities such as publications or attendance at conferences. So it should be seen as a live document throughout the candidature, and also to record what the students have actually achieved, to make that openly available, whether digitally or in hard copy for the employer.
Fantastic. Some very nice, really good comments coming in that are really helpful. Mark's, I think, picking up on your point, Hugh, there about various versions of the form relevant to sector needs, and I think you were making the point with section 4 that we should be aiming within a template frame to have a strong degree of flexibility in terms of how that those sections are completed, which may very well be relevant to particular programs and also particular potential destinations for students. And Edward and Steve are making connection. Steve's making connection to VTI, which we'll come to in a minute.
Yeah.
There's a question from Esther which we really need to think about, I think, which is a good question. They're all good questions, fantastic questions. Opportunity to contextualise time out from the programme. Time out for various reasons, some potentially relevant even where they're not counted towards the PhD, and we may come to that as an issue for later on in terms of additional information.
But that would come under section 4.3,
Okay.
because at Swansea we would record that as, should we say, suspension of the study. We record reasons against those. There's no reason why we couldn't print those reasons. Well, as long as they are in the student's interest, that's what you've got to remember as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And there may be others, I mean, Esther, I think that's part of what Esther is saying, but also the possibility of where they're doing things which might be potentially relevant to their study, as opposed to reasons for having to suspend study. So, and that might be relevant to the additional information section at a later point. Colleagues, I'm going to suggest we move on because one of the issues that's just been raised in the chat, and we will circulate the chat and the questions and we will reflect on those in the development process. We'll say a bit more about where we're going to go next at the end of this webinar. So I'm going to suggest we move on to the next slide. Mute the microphones if that's okay, Kath, except for mine, and Jen's, because one of the questions that Steve raised was how this might connect to the VTI framework, and the elements there are really very much the focus of our next slide, which I'm going to ask Jen to talk to in a moment or so. Okay, Kath, can you put up the next slide then? Would that be okay? Okay, just be a second while we move that on. Yes, it's not on the screen completely, so it's not filling the screen. Sorry, colleagues, there's a glitch for some reason, that, as in all of these things, we don't understand. Jen, I wonder if while we're trying to get that sorted out, that's an image of the VTI RDF. Do you want to say a little bit about how that fits into this context while Kathy's struggling with the technology?
Yeah, certainly, no problem. Yeah. And again, the question whether I think some of the questions that have come up through the chat could be applicable to what we have been discussing about sections 5 and 6 and how they work and what's actually put in 5 and 6. So before we go into that, I'll just I'm not sure how many of you that are on. I recognise some of the names, so I know some of you will know about the VTI RDF. But I'm going to just talk a little bit about it for those of you that don't. So basically, the Research and Development Framework is a framework to support researchers around the development of their capabilities whilst they're doing their PhD, but also throughout their career. You can see the image of it there. I'll go into the detail of that in a little bit more in a minute, but basically the RDF has been used for the last 5 years, and it's being used in the majority of universities in some way, shape or form now. And the Research Council's made an investment to get to where we are with the Research and Development Framework and its how it stands. In order to develop researchers in all areas, so not just in certain areas, but the whole host of things that they need to do to develop themselves to be employable in the future. So it's really about employability. You can see there that there are 4 domains. You can vaguely see that there are 4 domains. I'll just tell you what they are, because you may not be able to, that's fine. You may not be able to see that on the screen. So you've got domain A, which is knowledge and intellectual abilities, and you've got domain B, which is personal effectiveness. You've got domain C, which is research, governance and organisation, and you have domain D, which is engagement, influence and impact. And around that main 4 domains, you've got 12 subdomains, and outside of that are 63 descriptors. Sorry. we found is when looking at the HERE, and Section 5 in particular, the majority of things that are included in that really focus on the skills that people might get in Domain A, so only focusing on Domain A. Whereas we've found from employers that things that they value, many of those will actually come from the other 3 quadrants of the research development framework. So the way that the framework's been put together is with the sector, and basically people within the sector were asked, what makes a successful researcher, and they came up with sort of over 1,000 characteristics, and they've basically clustered those down into the 4, and then there's 3 subdomains per domain, and then into this 63 descriptors. And so it's obviously been validated by a number of different organisations, including the research councils, funding councils, a whole host of organisations, Higher Education Academy, things like that, which you can see on our website. And it links in very much, obviously, with what they might put in their record. So there is also an employability lens, which is sort of a filter on this research and development framework of the things that employers actually want their researchers to have when they employ them. I haven't got an image of that, but again, as I say, many of those descriptors come without that domain A, and so it's something to think about. As a result of putting the research and development framework together, there is also behind that a research and development framework, planner, which some of you may know about, may not know about. And really the planner itself is an electronic system that helps researchers use the framework so that they can actually work on the skills that they want to develop, identify the skills that they want to develop, record the things that they've achieved whilst they're undertaking development. And so the planner itself is a way for them to go in, identify what they want to develop, record things in it. It's got a repository of evidence in there, so they can store their achievements in there as well. They can also store documents in there, anything they like really, and they can provide reports as a result of using the planner as well, which shows where they've progressed and how they've progressed, what they've achieved. And I think that's how really we see this linking into the HERE report, because there would be a way of taking the reports out of the planner and putting them into the HERE so that you could see what people have actually achieved. So I don't know if that makes sense to everybody. I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that. Aha. Any questions at all?
That's very helpful, though, because it does provide a really important context that we need to build into our thinking. And as you say, a number of people will be familiar with Planner. So we've still got a couple of difficulties, as you'll see, on the technology.
Yeah.
So I do apologise for that. Kath, can you hear me, or Sam? Sam, can you hear me? What I'll try and do in a minute is take the presenter role and put it on this machine and see how that works. That will either cause the whole thing to crash, or it'll actually make it work effectively. Thanks, Edward. Yeah, I mean, the notion of pulling things through, it looks like colleagues are indicating that that's a very helpful thing, and certainly we've got to be thinking about the relationship of the planner and the HERE, and the material which is in both, and how we draw on both to help students in their development, but also in terms of their employability. Okay. I think Sam has now taken over the reins from Kath. Sam, can you hear me?
Try again.
One thing I would I would just say, having looked at some of the, sorry, I wasn't looking at the questions whilst I was speaking. One of the questions is about the limited period of content of information. I just wanted to say with regards to that, with regards to the planner is a long-term development tool. So therefore, even if the here is a specific period, people would be able to pull the information out as relevant from the, to add into it at any given time. Just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Jan. No, that's very helpful. And I think some of the issues that are in that kind of context, and Sam and I got a rather better presentation, which is great, are also being relevant to the undergraduate context of discussion. So that's really helpful. Data from other reflective sources, that's an interesting question mark, thank you. And I think we are going to come to the issues about boundaries, and particularly in relation to Section 5 and Section 6. Yes, and a key bit in that, which Esther and Steve have picked up, which is great, is about what the institution wants to put its name to, as opposed to what is, as it were, the personal affirmation of the student. And this is an institutionally stewarded document, so we do need to retain that sense of there are some things in a CV and there are some things in the here, and there will be connections, but they're not in any sense identical. What Vaughan and I are going to do now, with a bit of help from Hugh as appropriate and others, is to move the discussion on into these sections 5 and 6. What I'm going to ask Sam to do is to mute microphones, if that's okay for colleagues at the moment, apart from Vaughan, who's currently unmuted. Sam, can you mute everyone else's mic? Is that okay? So we can take out any background noise. And again, what we'll do is present you with some ideas and ask you to put things in the chat box, and also to contribute verbally as we go along. What we've got here in this section is actually some new material. We've talked about things that are validated by institutions and things that are affirmed by individuals, and we've also talked about material which is very germane to the programme that the student is developing or the research they're undertaking, and other aspects. And in this context, this is what brings us to section 5 and to section 6. And here we've got some real discussion to have, I think, because this has been written, some of this has been written this morning. It's very fresh stuff, and we're just thinking our way, and the developmental conversation is exactly what we need. So there are some questions for this section too. Do we need section 5 and section 6, or do we just need one section for a range of material covering a range of focal points? If we're going to have two, what's the rationale for splitting things up? And we've given you a couple of suggestions there on the screen. Section 5 might be about contribution to knowledge, and section 6 is about capabilities and competencies with an employer focus. So the question here is whether it makes sense to have sections which, as it were, have reference points that are in slightly different places, or is there another approach which might be around professional development in section 5 and personal development in section 6, and how do we decide what goes where? And within that context, there's a really big question, which is how are we showcasing competencies and capabilities of students as verified by the institution, and clearly how does this relate to the planner and so on. So lots of questions. I have to tell you we've got almost no answers, but I think as part of that, as colleagues have asked, the presentation will be available after the discussions, so we're thinking our way, we want to think our way with yourselves. Sam, if you can move the slide on, that will be really helpful. And what I'd like to do really is to invite Hugh, but particularly Vaughan, to say a little bit about our thinking around section 5 and section 6. And those are the next 4 slides. and then when we've perhaps looked at those 4 slides, again we'll have a break and you can tell us what you think. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, one section might be better. So we'll vote for one section already. Let's see how it develops as we go along. Paul, do you want to say about something about section 5 and 6? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the issues that are in my mind are how do we best capture and record the full range of achievements of PGRs, their skills, their competencies and experiences, and how do we present those to different audiences in languages that are meaningful to them. And can we do that in one section, which would address different audiences, the academic audience and the employer audience, or do we need different sections with different material and different tone? So in the last webinar that we had, there was a suggestion that we should have a section which was entitled Contribution to Knowledge. And there the thinking really was that this would be an inward-facing section which would be aimed at the academy, and it would be about academic achievement and recognition of academic achievement. So it would include things like publications, conference papers, prizes, international research experience, have you organised a research workshop, have you undertaken book reviews, have you done any refereeing, are you members of any professional bodies? So I think that was the suggestion from the last webinar. So section 5 would be about that. I guess that throws up some challenges in how we'd record and verify the data. And it also throws up some issues about whether that is a complete set of content or whether we'd need additional content to go with that. So I think there are some questions around that for me, and that ties in very much with what Jen said about this being domain A, knowledge and intellectual abilities. So that, if we could then move on to the next slide. Can we move on to the next slide?
Sorry, Sam, did you get that? Can we move forwards one?
So that is what a suggestion of what the contribution to knowledge material could look like. I'm sure we could add additional detail to that. I'm sure we could enhance that, and we'd value your opinion on that. And then if we can go on to the next slide. So if we are assuming that we have different audiences here, and if we're assuming that we may need different tones and different languages to foreground different material and background different material, one suggestion would be that section 6 rather could be an outward-facing section which targeted employers specifically, and it talked in their language. And if we did that, that would tie in very much with the RDF planner, and we could have a direct feed into that. And this would be about foregrounding skills, competencies and experience, and it would be about organising those in a way that's valuable to employers. So that was the thinking that we've got to so far, but we welcome your opinions on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Lauren. Sam, can you just move it to the next slide so people can get a sense of what we're talking around? And we can unmute people, which will mean the slides will actually look right. We have a problem in transferring between bits of the system today for some reason that I don't pretend to understand. Colleagues, a number of comments have been made in the boxes which are very helpful. We're going to from now on leave things, I think, unmuted for everyone, if Sam can do that. And failing that, just unmute yourself at this point if that's going to be quicker. One section from is Jen's suggestion. Some degree of commonality, though, is being pointed out by Jane, particularly if people want to search. Never a good thing to unmute things, is it really? Colleagues, if you can keep the background noise down, that would be really helpful. Contribution to knowledge is important to employers, some employers more than others, but yes. And then there's a point from Dago about career progression. So that's automatically so provides a feedback loop. Okay. That's a very interesting point that Esther's making around verifiability of publications, and perhaps having a link from a repository of publications, which might be a better place to store that information than in the here, and that may be an institutional decision. Interesting point from Jane, and you might want to comment on this, Vaughan, about are our audiences, i.e. the academy and employers, actually looking for different things, or are they looking for similar things? Jane's point, I think, Vaughan, you might want to comment on this, is that universities are employers also. Anybody got any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I think that is a very good point, Rob, but then we do need to bear in mind that around 50% of our PGIs are not going to get jobs with universities.
Yeah.
I also take the point that research institutions and pharma companies, for example, would be very much interested in the academic side of things as well, and we certainly shouldn't preclude them having access to that. But I guess that sectors like sort of marketing, finance, accountancy
Yes.
will be less interested in the academic student. Not uninterested, but less interested.
Yes. Maybe we also have to think, colleagues, about how this data might be used by the student, as well as whether the here itself will be a reference point for employers, and that's been a feature of some of the thinking about the undergraduate material as well. Steve's raised a point about including information about university accredited teaching programs with its HEA associate status, fellow status, which might also be an important element that could come into this section, which is probably going to be called not the additional information section, because we're kind of not terribly comfortable with that label currently, and if people have a better label, that would be great. Okay, I think we've given you a flavour of the discussions.
Rob, could I come in here quickly?
Please.
I've been reading the comments. They're all very, very relevant and extremely useful to move this
Absolutely.
discussion forward. I think what is important, and somebody made the comment earlier, that we will have to keep some sort of consistency between this document that we are playing around with at the moment and any diploma supplement or HEARs coming from the European higher education area, not only in terms of the feel of the document, but also in terms of employers searching on an electronic version of this and trying to target a particular section. So although I accept that there are different audiences, I would stress that this is a very, very early stage of the consultation, and really we have to be informed in our discussions then by developments in Europe.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. It's a kind of, we're contributing to something, but we're also going to be part of a wider development process for this to have maximum benefit. Thanks, Hugh. I mean, I think just a couple of other points there that we mustn't lose sight of. The work experience point that Steve is making, and also the variety and the need for students to use their HEAR, and that's certainly been a feature of the undergraduate context. And I think Laura's reinforcing our thinking that additional information is not really the best title, and bringing back the professional development title, which is a nice one to retain.
And the slide that you got on the screen is the weakest of the whole document as far as I'm concerned. This is where we really need to do some work and to build this section up. I like some of the ideas that that Vaughan has put into the previous slide. But this is the area. Section 5 and 6 are the big ones for the discussion.
Yes, and Jane's suggesting skills and capabilities, skills and abilities. We've had capabilities and competencies.
Absolutely.
I think there may be an issue, Jane, just with the notion of self-assessment coming into this, given that given the institutional verification and status of the HEAR, institutions may not want to go too far into the self-assessment territory. That might be more for a more personally referenced document, but it's certainly, that boundary is certainly something we need to talk about. Okay, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in this material. in these sections. There's a lot of sense that this is valuable. There's a lot of sense that we could develop it. There's the work experience point, the professional qualifications in learning and teaching. There's a question of what we do about publications and how this relates to career progression. And I think one of the things that came out with the undergraduate here was a guide, now a reference pack, and I think we'd be doing something very similar in this kind of context. Okay, Adam's raised a point about the interactivity of the document and how I guess it's framed to highlight particular material. And at the moment, I guess it will depend on how it's used, because it's both a complete document, which the institution wants to sign off, but it's also potentially a reference point that the student can pull material from and use in applications, and that would be much more of a tailored use of the material. Hugh, do you just want to finish up and then, yeah, and that's really good affirmation from Jen before we move on about the planner tying into the here, and I think that link is one we really need to pursue. Sorry, Hugh, do you just want to finish us off with the final section, and then we'll perhaps say a little bit about next steps and give people a chance just to think about how they might want to contribute to that.
Yes, I presume you're talking about section 1 and 2 there. I would like, I've been reading comments there about mobility and industrial placements. All of these will have to go into section 1, 6.1 or 6.2 or 6.1, yeah. All of the skills, the competencies, where we put them on this document is the challenge. But also before that, it's how do you record them? I'm currently looking at a new online system to manage postgraduate research students. I think we are one of the first universities, if not the first, to use it. It has immense potential, as far as I'm concerned, to record a lot of the information which I aspire to being able to record and then reproduce. And I foresee that if we adopt this system, that in a formal student supervisory meeting, a student can record in advance of a meeting, shall we say, following experiences, whether that's industrial placements or publications or conferences, and the supervisor can verify and save that document there and then, which will then feed back into the student ecosystem from which we can derive the information and put it onto the here. So in the background, I'm trying to come up with solutions as well as posing questions, and I think that is the way forward.
Smashing. Thanks, Hugh. Vaughan, do you want to say anything else at this point before we just move to the final phase?
No, let's move to the next steps.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, just to pick up on what people are saying in the chat and acknowledge that, I mean, there's an important and relevant point being made to how here is material is used as opposed to it just being there as a blob of stuff, and how we can help students to make best use of what they've got. And the sense which is reprising some of the undergraduate discussions that digitization is important, the tool, the facility to build on developmentally the here is important, student ownership is important. And Steve is picking up the LinkedIn dimension, which I think has been talked about a little bit in the context of the undergraduate here. We're not expecting the researchers to populate there here. I think we're expecting the institution with in communication with the researcher to populate the here. And there's a question here about how, as Steve's raised, how this fits. It's one of Vaughan's questions early on, how this fits with the existing system. So a lot of things to talk about and a lot of reference points as well. Hugh, do you want to take us through the last couple of slides, and then we'll see if there are final points?
Yes, by all means.
And sign off. Thanks.
Could we move on? I think the next slide is just the final section of the document. Nothing to say on that.
So we can forge your signature.
Yes, and it's dated 1st of June 2015.
Yeah.
Thinking in advance.
Absolutely. This is planning. And then there's one final slide, I think, Sam.
Yeah. So yes, we've given you the opportunity to feed into this seminar, and as Rob has stated, we will collate all of that information. I will stress once again that this is the first stage of a long process of consultation, I think. I would, and I think we all as planning team would like to engage more with students. The response I've had to students at Swansea has been extremely welcoming, and I would invite you to share the template with your students and again get their comments. Those are the users as far as I'm concerned. I'd also like to engage more with employers, as somebody mentioned earlier. I think that the initial discussions we've had today with VTI is critically important, and I absolutely welcome the input that you've been able to offer. I suppose what we need to do is to reflect how much of the detail which is recorded in the RDF can be incorporated into the here and where. What is of critical importance for me as well is that we engage with the European Universities Association and with UK International Unit. I have spoken to Leslie Wilson in the EUA, and she's very, very keen to monitor responses to this webinar. And UK are very, very keen to represent the views of the sector as and when and if we get a consensus. So that is extremely important that we get that into the European discussion. If this report will be considered now by the Bologna follow-up group, and if that is supported, it will be included in a communique of the European ministers. It would, in my opinion, be superb if the UK could lead on that project. There is potential, I suppose, for applying for European funding through the European Commission and in partnership with the EUA to progress this. I know some of some of the colleagues contributing to this are members of the EUA CDE, which is the Council for Doctoral Education. Again, another critical body. It's critically important we get involved with them. Right. There are a number of other bodies in the UK. Academic Registrars Council is one. I'm pretty sure you could list them all. And some or other, I would urge us all to get together and to discuss this a little bit further, taking on board the responses from you and also from those who have registered with the Higher Education Academy on the email. I suppose what we need to do then is to refine the template and maybe come back with another model for you.
Yes, and perhaps with some more questions as well, which reflect the discussion. That's great. Just one or two things to pick up before we finish, and people may want to add bits and pieces. There's quite an interesting set of comments in the chat box. Mark is talking about consistency and becoming recognisable by stakeholders, but also recognising that not every IT system, particularly perhaps some of its own institution, can produce the material that we'd need to make sense to those stakeholders. There's certainly a degree of affirmation from Esther about the formative use of the here, which is great, and another sort of use too, which is about students selecting material that's particularly relevant to particular applications, so that employers don't have to wade through material that they don't see as relevant, and perhaps that's quite important given the variety of roles that our postgraduate researchers take. And I think possibly in response to your comment, Jen is confirming that VTI would be really happy to be a partner in this. As comment about the SMEs, the answer in relation to, I think, postgraduate researchers is limited, but we've done some work with SMEs in relation to the undergraduate here, so we have had some input, and we can certainly pick that up as we go forwards. There's a briefing sheet, I think, for SMEs and the here on the HEA website. Is there a role for the degree verification system such as HEAD, Jane's asking? Certainly been talked about in the context of the undergraduate here, and I guess it may be equally relevant in this context as well. Any final thoughts that people want to put together? They're not final in the sense that you've got a pro forma, or you can email us and send additional thoughts back, and we will make the webinar complete with all its glitches and the chat and the slides available to you all who attended within the next 24 hours. So that may stimulate some further thoughts, but it would be good if the dialogue didn't stop when we all put the phone down. In fact, it'll be essential that the dialogue doesn't stop. Any other comments before we finish?
No, just to thank you to everybody for their input. I think that's been really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely, fantastic. Yeah. Okay, and Alice has come up with a great possibility here as well. So another possibility for, just lost it now. There it is. Research achievement profile and professional development and training sections. So there are interesting ways of cutting the cake, and we've got a really enlarged and rich vein of thinking that you've provided us with, particularly for sections 5 and 6, which is absolutely great. I think the sense I have so far is that there is need for 2 sections, and it's just a question of how we refine the content of those. But you can prove me wrong in the days and months ahead. Okay, thank you, Vaughan. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, colleagues, Nikki and Chris at the Academy. Thank you, everyone, for participating. It's been a really good discussion via the chat. Lots of fantastic points that, rest assured, we will do our very best to make into something more meaningful, usable, manageable, and above all something that supports our students in their learning and their development as we go forwards, and maybe even leads in Europe, which would be just fantastic. Thank you for your time, thank you for your participation, and as I say, we'll let you have the materials within the next 24 hours, all being well. Thanks you, thanks Vaughan, and cheerio from a slightly grey Wigan. Thank you. Bye.
All the best. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Hugh. I think that went well.
Yes, Vaughan, you're still there. Good.
Yep. Useful debate, I thought.